Part 234. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2335. General AncientChina said, Your Majesty should have dispatched a new protector of Anxi. When we return to Zizhu, the protector of Anxi should also arrive. In fact, the new Anxi protector was still in the capital at this time. He only received the order yesterday to bid farewell to relatives and friends today, and plan to leave tomorrow. Because the war is urgent, and the distance between the two places is too far, the news is lagging behind, and now no one knows what is going on in Zizhu, so he can't stay for a long time, and he will not bring his family this time. As soon as he had finalized the person who would go with him, an internal servant came to pass the order, Your Majesty has set up a family banquet in the palace, and asked you to come to the palace to have a light meal together. Qiao Qiaogong thought about it and went to the palace with his wife. If it is said to be a family banquet, it is really just a family banquet, except for the emperor and his wife, it is only the prince concubine and a few princesses. Duke Qiao brought his wife to salute, and the emperor waved his hand with a smile. The family doesn't need to be too polite, just sit down and let the imperial kitchen serve the dishes. The prince led a group of younger sisters and called out cousin before sitting down separately. Of course, when the royals eat, they don't really say a word, they just eat. While eating, the emperor recommended Chai Wei what he thought was a good dish, and by the way, he said something about the western regions, this time you are in a hurry to take office. The emperor said, even Li Qing has said that AncientChina is the best among the vassals, and many of the generals in the Han dynasty are not as good as they are. Chai Wei responded. The emperor remembered Guo Xiao, and snorted coldly, Guo Xiao is far worse than General AncientChina. I heard that he also brought gold and silver utensils to play when he went on an expedition, and even his tents were inlaid with gold and silver. He sent his military account to AncientChina, but AncientChina rejected it. The pros and cons of these two generals can be seen from this. When you go to Zizhu, you don't want to learn Guo Xiao. Chai Wei responded more seriously, saying that he would definitely manage the western regions well and would definitely live up to His Majesty's expectations. The emperor nodded with satisfaction. The area of the western regions in the central plains lies not in the breadth of the land, nor in the lush population, but in the trade routes. 70% of the connections between the central plains and the western regions, or even further afield, depend on this western region's trade route. Only 30% is at sea, so you must guard the trade route, and don't let the Turks ruin the trade route again. Chai Wei nodded again and again. The emperor looked at the prince and said with a smile, I've told everything I want to tell you, and ask your cousin if there is anything else you need to tell me. The prince thought to himself, what can he have to say to a cousin, a high-ranking official who wants to send out a heavy army? Could he just say it in front of the emperor? Did he say the emperor could sleep at night? While the prince complained in his heart, he raised his head and said to Chai Wei, cousin, when you arrive in the western regions, why don't you help find Zhou Tai and the others? He said, the last time the news came back was not clear. It just said that some information about cowpox was found, but there is no specific information. The prevention and treatment of smallpox is a major event. They have been out for almost a year, and there should be news. Bar. After glancing at Mingda, who was sitting beside him, he said, also, the concubine is still in the team. Mingda became filial after the new year, so she should get married, right? The emperor had wanted to talk about this for a long time, but when he heard the prince mention it, he immediately became refreshed, and nodded again and again, yes, you go to the western regions to find Bai Cheng. If they find a way to grow cowpox, they will come back quickly. If you can't find it, you have to go back to Beijing to report your work, and go out again later. At least come back and get married. The emperor smiled and said, he is your cousin-in-law. If you don't act well, just teach him a lesson. Chai Wei just listened to what he said, Didn't he see that Princess Mingda, who was sitting beside her, was blushing? Obviously, he is very satisfied with this future concubine. As the saying goes, a son-in-law is half a son-in-law, especially this one is not only the concubine's concubine, but also seems to be very liked by the concubine. He is. However, Chai Wei still agreed, and praised Bai Chang. Bai Gongzi is also a young talent, he was admitted to the Imperial College at a young age, and he is also a companion to His Royal Highness. Will it go wrong? The emperor thought of the boy who stood in front of him and patted his chest and said that he would treat his princess well, and nodded secretly. Seeing that the emperor nodded in agreement, Chai Wei didn't want to teach Bai Cheng even more. It was a meal that made the ruler and his ministers friendly. No, it was relatives who were happy. Anyway, Chai Wei finally took his wife out of the palace happily. Mrs. Jiao Qiagong was a little worried. Her husband's promotion was naturally a good thing, but she went to such a far place in the western regions. I heard that there was yellow sand all over there, and some people didn't take a bath for half a year. Mrs. Jiao Guo said to her husband, "When will we leave for Zizhu?" "Wait for you to settle down." Jiao Qiagong glanced at his wife and said, "What are you going to do? There is yellow sand in the sky, the sun is still big, the children are still young, it is the critical time to study and practice martial arts, it is not easy to go there to ask a gentleman." He said, "Just stay in the capital, go to the palace if you have nothing to do, the relationship between your majesty and the empress and mother is very good, you go to the palace more, wait for the children to be older, maybe you can go for a while. To go to the Chongquen Museum." Mrs. Jiao Guo was stunned for a moment, the prince is so old, isn't there a lot of companions in the Chongquen Museum now, why do people still want to enter? Jiao Guo said, "As long as the prince is still the prince for one day, then he has to study. The teachers in the Chongquen Museum are not the prince, but the lecturers. It doesn't matter how many students in the Chongquen Museum change, as long as the prince is still the prince, the Chongquen Museum there must be a companion to read." Madame Jiao Guo. She paused and then whispered, "Didn't you tell us to not interact with the prince before?" "This time is different from the past," Jiao Guo said, "the crown prince has a young grandson, even if, then we will follow the imperial edict, and his majesty will not blame it. Are the risks now comparable to those in the past? So you can still get closer." Mrs. Jiao Qiagong nodded, thinking that she would not need to go to the western regions, and was secretly happy in her heart. As soon as she was happy, she wanted to make Guo Gongqiao also happy. "I will send a few more people to serve the Guo Gongye at that time. There will always be someone who will take care of the Guo Gongye because of the bitter cold there." Grandpa Guo did not refuse, but still said, "Send a few less, your majesty does not like extravagant people." Mrs. Jiao Guo should go. Chai Wei was the emperor's nephew, his father was a founding general, and his mother and the emperor were sisters and brothers of the same mother. Whether they were sisters and brothers, or between rulers and ministers, the relationship between the two sides was excellent. In particular, his mother, Princess Pingyang, was a real life and death grief, and she was also a wise and brave female general during her lifetime. Chai Wei's ability is not bad, so the ministers did not have much objection to the emperor's exceptional promotion of Chai Wei a few levels in a row to the position of the protector of Anzi. Everyone accepted it calmly, and Chai Wei took office calmly. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2336. The one who went to the western regions with Chai Wei also had the imperial decree to deal with Guo Xiao. The emperor expressed his anger at Guo Xiao's loss of the city. Zhou Cheng of Kaosai has repeatedly reminded to be careful of people in the city, but he didn't care, and he didn't even send a few more patrolling people, which made the people in the city collude with those outside the city. This calamity. So the emperor directly deprived him of his official position. As a result, When Chai Wei was far away, the old man of the emperor came out of the hall one day, and when the cold wind blew outside, he stopped to watch the desolate winter scenery. Gu Zhong hurriedly put a cape on him and said carefully, "Your Majesty, it's going to snow today." The emperor glanced at the dark clouds in the sky. Gu Zhong was right, the sky was indeed going to snow, and it didn't take long for him to say this before the sky started to snow. The emperor looked at the snow for a long time, sighed at last, and instructed, "Let Zhongsha province draw up a decree to restore Guo Xiao's official position, send someone to Zizhu to bring him back, and let the Ministry of Rites prepare a funeral ceremony for him to mourn." Gu Zhong responded immediately, and his heart was also a little excited. His Majesty is in love, this is a good thing. Man Bao and the others knew nothing about it. When they returned to Zizhu, the new Angzi protector had not arrived yet. General Guo had already been put in the coffin. If General Guo wanted to help the coffin to return home, he would have to wait for the court's order. He either buried his father in Zizhu, or he could only resign and return to his hometown. General Guo's coffin was parked in the Guo temple in Zizhu at this time, and Man Bao and the others went to the Guo temple to worship him the next day after returning to Zizhu. In the words of Mr. Zhuang, "Anyway, when we meet, people are dead, and all hatreds are gone. It's a ritual to worship." So Bai Shan and others prepared the funeral and went to worship. Because Lu Huan was a relative, the funeral ceremony was even heavier. General Guo died, but he and General Guo really walked according to their relatives, and when they met again, they called their cousins. General Guo also got out of the pain, and he was able to joke with them, "You and I already kissed, but you lost so much blood to me, and kissed even more." Lu Huan nodded in agreement. Bai Erlang said from the side, "Then we also kissed, and the blood we gave you is the same." Bai Shan asked Man Bao curiously, "Didn't you say that blood transfusions are not easy for close relatives? How can Lu Huan give blood to General Guo?" "Man Bao, are they close?" "Of course," Lu Huan said, holding out his chest, "my grandmother is his aunt." After calculating, Man Bao said, "It's all right, it's been a few generations apart, and the blood has been lost for so long. It's all right now, so it must be all right." At this time, the 7 people were sitting in a row on a railing of the Guo temple. Looking at the busy monks and the people who came to worship the Buddha below, General Meng asked General Guo, "Do you want to continue to stay in Zizhu?" General Guo said in a low voice, "I don't know if your Majesty will question my father. If His Majesty allows it, I still want to stay in Angzi. His father has led this team for several years, and he has always been in this team. Even if the western regions are bitterly cold, he does not want to leave." General Meng patted his shoulder and said, "I can ask my father to plead for you." General Guo did not refuse, but nodded, "Thank you." Bai Shan said, "We can't help you very much in this matter. If you go back to the capital, we can intercede for you in person. Now that people are outside, it is obviously impossible to write a book and participate in local military affairs." General Guo smiled and said to them, "I know, you are civil officials, it is not convenient. By the way, you also have credit for this western expedition, right? Will you be serving as an official when you go back?" Bai Shan sighed, "The new Angzi protector has not yet arrived, and General AncientChina hasn't decided when the class teacher will return to the DPRK. We have to wait. There are often exams for the Ministry of Rites, but the exams for the Ministry of Personnel are held at the end of March every year. If we miss it, we will have to wait another year, and if we want to go to work, we have to return to the capital before February. Otherwise, you won't be able to register. General Guo, with your identities and credits, can you go directly to the official position?" Bai Shan was a little reluctant. All of them have passed the Jinchi examination. It would be a big loss not to be admitted to the Ministry of Rites and the Ministry of Personnel. Bai Erlang also nodded again and again, that is, If His Majesty speaks directly to grant an official, is it considered a kindness or our own ability? No, no, it is better to be a normal examiner. Lu Huan asked him, do you still want to be a county magistrate as a concubine? Bai Erlang choked and asked, why can't the concubine be sent out to be the county magistrate? Don't you think that General AncientChina is also the concubine? I still lead troops to fight outside. But Lu Huan scratched his head and said, but those are the princesses of the previous generation, the princesses of this generation, and the concubines seem to have idle jobs, not real jobs. Everyone is eating the princess's soft rice. Who wants to be a small county magistrate of the 6th or 7th grade? And your concubine is more noble than other concubines. You are Princess Mingda's concubine. There are also highs and lows between concubines. Husband and wife are more valuable. Princess Mingda is not only the princess, but also the most favored daughter of the emperor. Naturally, Bai Cheng is more noble than other concubines. Lu Huan didn't understand him. We don't want to be the concubine because we don't want to be bullied by the princess. Since you are the concubine, you definitely don't mind relying on the princess. Why do you still want to be the county magistrate? Bai Erlang choked, then lowered his head and thought. Seeing that there was a look of approval on his face, Man Bao said, Mingda still wants to go to various places, but your Majesty loves Mingda and definitely doesn't want her to go out of Beijing. If you go out, take Mingda out. Is it all right? Bai Erlang's eyes lit up when he heard it. Yeah, Mingda still wants to go somewhere else to play. I can take her when I'm outside. This time, even General Guoxiao became curious. Don't you want to eat soft rice when you are the concubine? Bai Erlang said, of course I want to eat soft rice, but I don't eat everyone's soft rice. He said, I just want to eat Princess Mingda's soft rice. Bai Shan turned his head and said to him, you won't be able to catch up with the Jinchi examination this year, but you can try it next year. If you pass the examination next year, you will also take the examination for the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Personnel the year after, and you will be a year later than me. When the time comes, see if there are any new official vacancies in the place where I put it out. You can put it out there, and we will be closer. Man Bao rubbed his palms. This is good, we can go to you to play at that time. Bai Erlang asked her, it's okay for me and Bai Shan to go out, can you also go out? Man Bao laughed and said, then you underestimate me too much. Bai Shan and I have a plan for a long time. It's not a big problem, but it's you. The most important thing is that you can get the officials who are sent out. General Meng listened with envy, looked at General Guo and asked, why don't you come to Shazhu, we will guard the Yumen Pass together. General Guo shook his head. See you tomorrow. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2337. The new Angzi Duhu arrived at noon one day. At that time, it had been 4 days since Manbao and the others returned to Zizhu. It was the time when the bones were the laziest. Mr. Zhuang also pitied them for running all the way, and they lost weight. So there is no assignment for them. So Manbao stayed in bed and didn't get up until it was almost noon. Even Yin Or was also influenced by them and slept for a long time. After the first day of panic, Chang Shao has calmed down. The master slept and he also slept. He didn't get up until there was movement on the master's bed. He packed himself first and then went to the kitchen to get hot water. Sure enough, when he brought the hot water back to the house, Yin Or was still in the bed and didn't want to get up. While taking out his clothes to serve his master dressing, he gave his master a reason: it's too cold in the western regions. Yin Or nodded in agreement. Mr. Zhuang had been drinking tea and reading books around the stove. When he saw Yin Or finally getting up, he turned his head and instructed the maid, "Go and call Joe Man and the others up too." The 10 dancers have officially become maids, and they are divided into various positions and live happily. Because there is not much work here, basically just cleaning the yard, and occasionally handling some ingredients and medicinal materials, the master in the yard basically doesn't care about them, and they can go out for a walk every day and listen to their voices. If they don't want to go back to the Central Plains with them, they can also go to the Duhufa for them to register, and then they can stay in Zizhu. But after the little girls discussed it privately, they all felt that if they stayed here, they might be captured as female slaves in the future, and besides dancing and singing, they had almost no means of making a living, so they might as well go with them. They don't have parents or family members, or their parents and family members don't know where they are, and whether they are still alive in this world. Leaving their homeland is not so difficult for them to accept. Seeing that they had made up their minds, Yin Wei asked Chang Shao to teach them some skills in serving people, such as how to brew tea in the Central Plains, and what the master should serve when he sits and sleeps. Poor Longevity, who had been a servant for so many years, was suddenly promoted to the nanny who raised the little maid. Chang Shao also knew little about the work of the maids, but he felt that the maids and their servants were the same. Didn't they all serve the master? Then I teach them according to their daily work, that is, they go wherever the master goes, and if the master wants to sit, you have to find a place to sit and arrange it properly, not cold, not hot. Although they are dancers, they still know a little about this kind of skill and knowledge, so they accept it very quickly, and now they feel that they are already qualified servants. Oh, no, they are maids. They went to knock on the door, but Man Bao and the others still spent nearly half an hour washing up and appearing in the lobby. Mr. Zhuang glanced at the time and nodded and said, "Very good, we can have lunch directly. It's quite economical to support you." Man Bao bowed his head in embarrassment and didn't dare to ask for food, so he honestly brought a bowl of milk tea and a piece of cake for breakfast. It's a pity that when this little thing entered their stomach, it was like a drop of water into the sea, and there was no feeling at all. A few people touched their stomachs, and they winked as their eyes wandered, planning to find another excuse to go out today. The mutton buns they ate yesterday were delicious, but they can be eaten again today. It was also at this time that Nai Kenjun strode in from the outside and said to several people, "The new ones have been protected." Man Bao's eyes lit up and immediately asked, "Where are you now?" "I just entered the protector's mansion," said Nai Kenjun. "Xiaoguan came to see your lord immediately when he heard the news. He is probably talking to General Ashina in the protectorate's mansion right now." Bai Shan immediately looked at Man Bao. "Ordinarily, shouldn't you go to see Xinduhu? After all, we have to take many soldiers away." Man Bao immediately nodded solemnly, "Yes, I really want to meet you." Mr. Zhuang looked at them with a smile, waved his hand and said, "Okay, let's go." Everyone cheered in a low voice, turned around and ran out. Nai Kenjun didn't understand what was good about visiting Xinduhu, but he still followed him out and told them, "The new Chai Duhu and second young master Bai are still some relatives." Bai Erlang looked bewildered, turned his head and asked Bai Shan in confusion, "Is there a relative named Chai in our family?" He tried hard to recall the genealogy he had memorized. Nai Kenjun directly mentioned Bai Er, but not Bai Shan or the Bai family. Obviously, this family came because of Bai Er, and the relatives who Bai Er could be the chief protector of Angzi could only be the royal family. Bai Shanlu thought about it and asked, "Is it Duke Xiao?" Nai Kenjun, who wanted to sell his son, could only nod his head. "I really don't know how these people's brains grow. I heard that the family not only has to memorize the genealogy, but also the clan history. Anyone who has any relationship is recorded. So far, he has never seen the legendary book. He heard that only aristocratic families or big nobles can get it." Bai Shan turned his head and said to Bai Erlang, "It's your cousin, Guo Gongqiao is the eldest son of Princess Zhao, and Princess Mingda is the cousin of the first cousin. When you meet someone later, you can be more polite, and it's enough to honor relatives. Bai Erlang nodded immediately. He knew Princess Zhao, but Princess Mingda admired her aunt very much. So the group went out, waiting for the guards to bring their horses, when they saw Yuki running quickly and said, "Master Zhou, young Master Bai, second young Master Bai, the chief director invites a few to go to the Duhu mansion to meet the new Duhu." Lu Huan immediately asked, "What about us?" Ling Bing paused and said, "The chief executive didn't say anything, but the young masters have always been inseparable, so they should all be able to go." It happened that Daji and the others led the horse out, and Man Bao took the horse and went up, saying, "There is so much nonsense, it's right to go, let's go." Lu Huan and the others also thought about it, so they mounted their horses one after another. Yin Or also rides horses. Zizhu city is so big, and they don't live too far from the protectorate. They have to cross the most prosperous street along the way. Not too cold right away. Of course, there must be no warmth in the carriage, but it also has its own scenery, and everyone can still talk. Although Bai Shan knew about Duke Qiao, he had never met him, so he asked Man Bao, "Have you met Duke Qiao?" Man Bao tried hard to recall, "I haven't seen much at the court meeting, but when His Majesty was seriously ill, he stayed overnight, and people who came in and out would naturally meet each other, but he never spoke. When the emperor was seriously ill, the imperial doctor on duty in the imperial hospital, the maids on duty, the officials on duty, the royal family members on duty from the royal family, and the powerful royal relatives who refused to leave because of their loyalty would meet every day. Recorded, if there is a problem on any day, all the people recorded in the booklet will be asked." At that time, Man Bao went to sign the booklet every day. Naturally, she saw the name of Duke Qiao in the book next door, but at that time, her mind was on the emperor, and she didn't pay much attention to people. Now she thinks of Duke Qiao. What she looked like, she couldn't remember herself. It was because of her good memory that she remembered that she had seen the name of Mr. Qiao Qiaogong in the autograph, and more than once. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2338. Bai Shan looked at Lu Huan and Yin Or. Bai Erlang didn't have to look, he didn't know, and Bai Er wouldn't know. Lu Huan said, "I'm not familiar with it either." Yin Yus said, "I heard from my father that he is not bad. He is Duke Qiao of Zihu. Your Majesty has a deep relationship with Princess Zhao and Duke Xianqiao, so he is also very kind to his two nephews." Bai Shan understands it in seconds, so this is the one who has been moved up by the ancestors, but it is not a big mistake in terms of personality and talent. When they arrived at the Duhu mansion, General Guo Ziajun came out to pick them up with red eyes. He still lives in the Duhufu now, but he is already ready to move, and he can take over when the new Duhu arrives. Seeing that his eyes were red, Bai Shan asked, "Your Majesty's will has come down?" General Guo couldn't help crying again, nodded and said, "Your Majesty has dismissed my father's official position. I may not be able to help the coffin to return to my hometown." The emperor was so angry with General Guo, so General Guo could not write to mention the matter of returning the coffin to his hometown at this time, so he could only temporarily put the coffin in the Guo temple for later, or bury it in Zizhu. General Guo wanted to wait a few years. After 2 years, the emperor's anger had almost subsided, and he would bring up the matter of returning home with the coffin. Bai Shan could only sigh, and reached out and patted his shoulder. Man Bao didn't know how to comfort him, so he could only pat him on the shoulder in turn. Yin Or, seeing that they all patted him, he didn't want to pat him, so he went up to pat him too. When Zhou Liru saw it, he also stepped forward and patted it. General Meng on the side also raised his hand, and General Guo raised his head and looked at him with red eyes. General Meng was a little bit at a loss. He put it down as if nothing had happened and said, "Go in, General Ashina and Chai Du who will be waiting inside, and I'll move you in after the handover. Bai Shan immediately said, we'll help you move too. Not to mention General Ashina, Chai Du who was also very polite to them, especially to Zhou Man and Bai Erlang. After all, the emperor and the prince had just mentioned them before they came. He didn't expect that luck would be so good. They were still in Zizhu city, so he smiled and asked about Zhuman's cowpox. Man Bayadao, we have planted 3 types of pox here, and the results are not bad. We decided to bring the people who have had the pox back to the Taiyuan hospital to check the situation. She paused for a while and said to Chai Du, because the testers are all soldiers in the army, General Guo promised us that we could take these people away. Chai Du smiled and said, since General Guo promised you, everything will be business as usual. Man Bao breathed a sigh of relief, smiled and said to Chai Du, thank you for your kindness. Chai Du didn't understand how he was lenient. By the time he knew it, the people below were already taking the bill to pay him the bill. They had to take away 46 people in total. It just so happened that they were either wounded soldiers or very old. Veterans, such soldiers returning to their hometowns are considered retired, so they have to pay for settlement. In addition to the settling expenses, it even listed the travel expenses and the 100 taels of silver that General Guo Xiao had promised. Of course, it's not 100 taels per person, otherwise the emperor can't afford it. It is 46 people who share 100 taels. The official who came to report the account explained, General, except for the 100 taels that General Guo went out, the rest must go to the public account. Unlike General Guo, Chai Du was never poor from his background, and he was not as extravagant as General Guo, so he didn't pay much attention to money, so he only felt distressed and signed a pen. He said, take out the accounts of the Protectorate's mansion and I'll take a look. If there is no money, he has to find a way to get money. The Angzi Du not only manages local government affairs, but also manages military affairs. Although the Ministry of War provides the military with salaries and armaments, there are definitely deficiencies. It is necessary to patrol the borders and be alert to counter-attacks by other small countries in the western regions, which will require more money. Chai Du thought about it and asked, is the trade route from Sui and Tianzhu open? The officials immediately reported, the battle between the Great and Small Bolu has ceased, and there is no winner or loser, and the trade route to Tianzhu is now open again. Chai Du nodded and said, go back and draw the map from Khotan for me. We will set up stations along the way to garrison troops. The official was taken aback, garrison. Chai Du nodded and said as a matter of course, there are many horse thieves and bandits along the way. In order to protect the safety of the caravan, troops are stationed at the post to protect them. Since it is protected, it is natural to collect business tax, and the local government should also hand over a part of the money to support the soldiers, not a lot, but together with the business tax, it should be able to guarantee the cost of stationing troops. Moreover, the inn can also greet the merchants and travelers passing by, which is also a source of income. Chai Du made an calculus in his heart, and he felt even less distressed about the money. After handing over the list to the officials, he said, the chief Asuna is about to leave, and Lord Zhou wants to go with them. You should finish this matter as soon as possible. The emperor is still waiting for Bai Er to go back to marry, and the prince is also waiting for Zhou Man to go back and report the smallpox incident. If there is Chai Du, the Du mansion will handle these procedures for Bai Shan and the others very quickly, and it can be done almost as soon as they are brought up. The soldiers who followed Bai Shan's buttocks and waited for the registration to receive the money sighed. Sure enough, there are people who are easy to handle. They used to come to the Du Huifu, and it would be good to be able to do one thing after 3 trips. Done. Bai Shan himself lamented this distinction. They used to come to the Du mansion to do business, and even with General Guo's instructions, they would occasionally sit on the bench. Especially Mr. Zhuang, he had been sitting on the bench for 3 days in a row in the protectorate. Bai Shan led the remnants and veterans to get all the settlement and travel expenses, and then took them out and asked them to go back to the barracks first. We will leave the day after tomorrow, and you will have 1 day tomorrow to say goodbye to your comrades and prepare things. Go. Everyone looked at each other and didn't move for a while. The eldest one took out his purse, took out half of the money from it and said, "Young Master Bai, as long as you can bring us back to the Central Plains, we will get it. Half of the money will be split with you." Others also ripped open their wallets to get money. Bai Shan was stunned for a moment, and then pushed the money back with a smile. "Bai is not short of money to this extent. This is the settling fee given to you by the imperial court and His Majesty, and it is the imperial court's reward to you for guarding the border and defending the country for many years. If Shan takes this amount of money, he is not worthy of being a human being." He said, "You have put away your things. When you return to the capital, I still owe you a piece of silk cloth." Because a group of people came in later, there were still 22 people, so Bai Shan and the others didn't have so many ready-made cloths, so they owed it first, and waited until they returned to the capital. The silk cloth here is too expensive, and buying them here is not worth it at all. The soldiers had long given up on the cloth, and were even prepared to give half of the settling expenses. If Bai Shan didn't want it at this time, it would be the same as the money he got. He was so happy that his eyes turned red. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2339. Bai Shan and the others were busy packing their things and preparing to go home. Of course, there were many of them, and a few of them just stood in the courtyard with their hands together and basked in the sun while directing the guards to pack their luggage. This time on the return trip, Manbao won't put things in Keek's space. Except for the jewelry she liked that she picked out earlier, only one of Bai Erlang's cat's eye gems is still in the space. Everything else is on the bright side. Of course, they won't open the box to show others, they are all well hidden in the box. However, everyone fought bandits together, went up the mountain to dig treasures together, shared the spoils on the prairie together, and exchanged treasures with each other. No one knew what was in whose hands. They didn't know much about the heavy rain living in the opposite yard, but they were still stunned at the luggage Zhou Man and the others brought back. "You have too many things, right?" "What are they?" Man Bao said, "There are everything, including jade, gems, various jewelry, and medicinal materials that we think are beautiful." "Medicine?" "Yes," Man Bao said, "there are some herbs here that are not available in the Central Plains, so I bought a little more and went back." Heavy Rain is a little moved, but forget it. He doesn't have much money in his hand, and the medicinal materials are not very useful in their town. After all, good medicinal materials need a good doctor to use them, right? If they make a move in Shazhu, they have no way, unlike the gems and spices in their hands, not only can they find a random merchant to make a move, but they also have a way. Heavy Rain pressed his mind. He came here this time to discuss with Bai Shan and the others about going back. The trade route was reopened, and there were far fewer bandits, horses, and thieves on the road, and this time General Ashina returned to the DPRK with a large army. Along the way, the soldiers borrowed from Shazhu, Suzhou, and Liangzhou were returned, and the summer was finally over. Zhou returned to the capital, so they didn't need to protect them along the way, so this price. Bai Shandao, we separated from the army in Shazhu, and went back to Liangzhou from your small town. For money, we can only pay you from Shazhu to the town at most. Of course, if you escort us all the way to Liangzhou, this money it is also negotiable." Heavy Rain, you don't go with the army. Bai Shan, no. Because General Ashina also sent the army back to Shazhu, and then he had to send the soldiers and horses in his hands to the states in batches. At that time, all the states had sent out generals to lead the troops with General Ashina. Except for those who died in battle, everyone else had to return to the original army. At that time, the merits of each army and the merits of each general will be returned by General AncientChina. After arriving in the capital, the court decided to send it to various states. After Bai Shan and the others knew about General AncientChina's journey, they didn't want to go with him, because he planned to return to the capital from Shazhu in 12 days. When Bai Shan and the others knew of his itinerary, they immediately indicated that they might not be on the same road, and they would separate when they got to Shazhu, so as not to disturb General AncientChina. General AncientChina didn't understand. They all went back to Beijing. Why did they go different ways until the day they set off? He saw the long rows of wagons and mules, and ox carts in their ranks. General AncientChina looked at the boxes on the carriage and mule, and then at the veterans and remnants sitting on the ox cart. After being speechless for a while, he turned his head and said goodbye to Chai Du, who came to see him off. Chai Du was also stunned for a moment, and he also started to chat with General AncientChina, and when everyone left, he stroked his beard and his confidant and said, "Although I'm a little younger, I'm still prudent. The main thing is that the heart is also good. It is rare to have prepared so many bullock carts." General AncientChina also looked away from the bullock carts, and for the first time he couldn't help but complain, "No wonder we have to separate from us when we arrive in Shazhu, and use bullock carts to transport troops, not to mention 12 days, add half the time. I'm afraid I won't be able to return to the capital. Now that the army is going out, and the class division is returning to the DPRK, so I don't rush. It doesn't seem slow when the ox cart is caught in the middle, but when I arrived in Shazhu, General AncientChina only rushed back to the capital with a few generals and guards." Speaking of bullock carts, even those mule carts with luggage would be hard to keep up with. He was right. Man Bao and the others were indeed unable to return to the capital within 24 days, but they could return to Xiuzhu within 24 days. The heavy rain sent them all the way to Xiuzhu. Yes, they crossed Liangzhou and escorted them to Xiuzhu, and they didn't charge a cent for the journey from the town to Xiuzhu. Because the goods in their hands were not sold in Shazhu, but planned to be taken to Xiuzhu, Bai Shan and Zhou Man agreed to introduce the goods for him to merchants. And there are more Han people in Xiuzhu, so he might be able to marry a Han Chinese wife and go home. When he arrived at the gate of Xiuzhu, the heavy rain couldn't help but let out a wow with his companions. They thought they were wow because they had never seen such a lively scene. Sound. De Yu and the others turned their heads to look at them, and said strangely, "Have you never seen such a prosperous city?" Man Bao closed his mouth and shook his head. "No, both Jingcheng and Yizhu city are much more prosperous than Xiuzhu city. It's just that Xiuzhu city was very quiet before. I didn't expect so many people to enter and leave Xiuzhu city in just over half a year," Bai Shan said, "and this is the North City Gate. This is the North Gate facing the grassland." Mr. Zhuang also opened the curtains and looked outside, and when he saw the familiar Xiuzhu City Gate, he let out a sigh of relief and finally came back. The carriages lined up to enter the city. As soon as the guards took out the documents to register, a soldier ran to the governor's house to report. After Manbao and the others entered the city, they walked for a while, and Wan Tian brought someone to greet them. He saw Bai Shan, Zhou Man, and the others on the horses with sharp eyes, and immediately jumped off the horse and ran forward to stop the convoy. Okay, how long do you have to recite everyone?" Bai Shan asked with a smile. "Brother Yang asked you to pick us up." "Yes," Wan Tian smiled until his eyes narrowed, and said, "The station is ready. Young masters and young ladies can go to the station to rest first." He glanced at the continuous motorcade behind him, and the smile on his face became even wider. He said, "The inn is not enough, so I can live in the inn next to it." So the group went to the inn to settle down first. Wan Tian did not arrange a room for Bai Shan and the others. After Nikanjun and the others settled in, they immediately sent a car carrying Zhou Man and his luggage to the governor's house. He asked Bai Shan and the others to say, when the little one came out, The uncle asked someone to tell the lady. The lady should have cleaned up the yard now, and asked Mr. Zhuang and the young masters and the young ladies to go home with the little one. Bai Shan and the others don't have any opinion. Anyway, they lived in the governor's mansion last time they visited Xiaohu. So the group moved to the governor's mansion. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2340. Yang Heshu had been waiting for them in the mansion ahead of time, and when they arrived at the door, they saw him and Mrs. Kui holding a child standing at the door. Man Bao lightly kicked the horse's belly, rushed up at a faster pace, dismounted and greeted them with a loud laugh. Brother Yang, Sister Kui, ah, this is Brother Chi. Chi Geer can already walk and speak, but he seems very shy. Seeing Man Bao squatting and talking to him, he embarrassedly blushed and hid behind his father. But halfway through hiding, he remembered what his father and mother taught him to be generous when talking to people, and he couldn't hide, so he stuck his head out from behind his father's thighs. Not only Man Bao, but even Bai Shan and the others will be heartbroken when they see it. They especially want to reach out and squeeze his round face. Mrs. Yang seemed to see what they were thinking, and immediately hugged her son in her arms, smiled and said, "The kitchen has prepared lunch for you, let's go to eat first." But after they really went in, they first followed the servants to the yard where they lived, cleaned up first, and then found the gifts they brought to Yang Heshu and Kui. Seeing what they were holding, Mrs. Kui couldn't help laughing. "You're not in a hurry, why don't you eat first and then take care of your luggage?" Man Bao said, "We're not very hungry yet." Yang Heshu smiled and said, "They are trying to show off. In this case, let's see what you brought back first." According to Wan Tian, you have a dozen cars loaded with luggage, which is comparable to a large caravan. Already. Bai Shan, there are so many of us. In addition to our own guards, there are many soldiers. However, Yang Heshu shook his head and smiled and said, "It's not that I haven't seen an envoy, and they bring a lot of people with them, but in addition to giving some gifts to the envoy, as well as the tributes they get when they return, who will accompany them? Are there so many things in the embassy?" He said, "The things in your convoy are all the goods you brought back, right?" Man Bao immediately said, "Not only ours, but also others, and there are many nice soldiers in the army." Yang Heshu was amused for a moment, and then said, "Look for a chance to take action in Xiaohu, at least you can't bring so many things back to the capital. Don't forget, although there are many guards of your own among the people you accompany, but you have official positions and tasks. You bring such a long motorcade into the capital, be careful that the sensors from the sensor station will drown you, even old Master Tang, I am afraid that you will be impeached." Thinking of Mr. Tang, Man Bao felt a chill down his spine, and went to see Mr. Zhuang with some uncertainty. "Will they really impeach me?" Mr. Zhuang also hesitated. "It's not like that. It's normal to bring more luggage when you go out, and it's also common to bring home some local specialties. Some officials are poor, and it is normal to take some goods to buy and sell when they travel between the two places. In those days, the magistrate of Lujian County often did this kind of thing." Yang Heshu said softly, "General Ashina returned to the capital 10 days ago, Your Majesty is overjoyed. Within 3 days, the gold, silver, and jewelry that General Ashina confiscated from the western regions were also sent to the capital together with the booklet. Your Majesty, immediately the great court meeting was held to discuss the merits and deeds." He said, "General Ashina and his subordinates of the West Army are naturally not to mention, even his son Guo Zhao, who was implicated by General Guo's loss of the city, has also been promoted to half rank, and General Ashina said that he won the turtle. The first achievements of the King's city are Bai Shan and Man Bao." Yang Heshu looked at Bai Shan and Zhou Man with a smile and said, Your Majesty praised you in front of hundreds of officials at the court meeting, and then heard General Ashina say that this time you have already obtained the method of growing cowpox, so I kept letting you go. The Ministry of Rights and the Imperial Hospital are watching to receive you. As a result, the Ministry of Rights and the Imperial Hospital waited, and Your Majesty also waited for you for several days, but you were nowhere to be seen. I just received a letter from Zhaihe yesterday, saying that Your Majesty is not angry when you mention you now, even the Ministry of Rights. There's a lot of resentment. Several people. Man Bao turned his head to look at Bai Shan turned his head to look at Bai Erlang, one by one, and finally saw Yin Or. Yin Or said indifferently, "Look at what I do, it's not that I want to take a detour to dig for flowers and plants, it's not that I want to take a detour to see the lake that looks like the moon, and it's not that I chased a sheep that didn't look like a normal sheep for a long time." Bai Shan and Man Bao felt guilty when they heard it, and even Mr. Zhuang felt guilty because he wanted to see the lake that looked like the moon. Mr. Zhuang coughed lightly, and said to Man Bao, "Then you should sell these things in Xiaohu. Take out the things you brought for your relatives and friends, and if the price is okay, you can sell them to the merchants here." Man Bao was reluctant, they brought it back with great difficulty, and if they took it to the capital, they could sell it for a higher price. Bai Shan was also reluctant, so he asked, "Brother Yang, are they in Xiaohu city on Thursday?" Yang Hesha glanced at him approvingly and said, "Thursday Lang is not here, but Xiang Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun are here." Having said this, he smiled and said to Man Bao, "Your niece is no worse than your fourth brother, as far as I know, for the past 6 months, your family's business in Xiaohu has been done by her. Take care of the business, your fourth brother occasionally walks on the grassland. After the goods are brought back to Xiaohu, someone will transport them back. If it is not for the new year, your fourth brother must go back. I am afraid he will stay in Xiaohu and wait for you." The reason why Yang Hesha knew this was because Thursday Lang would say hello to him when he left, so as not to miss the news of Man Bao. After all, officialdom is much better informed than their own. The second is because he has another collaboration with Thursday. There are many ethnic groups on the grassland, including Turks, Tile, and Xianbei, and because they don't have much sense of belonging to the court and His Majesty, there are many problems. On Thursday, Lang often went to and from the grasslands, and could get a lot of news from the bottom, so they would have exchanges. Moreover, he also hoped that Thursday Lang would bring in some goods, and what goods would not be brought in. Because of the closure of the city, the relationship between Yang Heshu and the local people in Xiaohu is a bit complicated. At present, it has basically been balanced. The ordinary people can't see anything. They basically agree with him as the new governor, but the local powerful officials and big businessmen are not. There are still some problems. Therefore, Yang Hesha can be trusted and can be used by foreign forces such as Shiro. Yang Hesha smiled and said, "I have already sent someone to tell your niece, and your niece-in-law, they may not be in Xiaohu city at the moment, they will definitely come to you when they come back, and then you can discuss what to do with these goods." After he finished speaking, he said, "You have only arrived in Xiaohu now. It's about to be New Year's Eve. Do you want to celebrate in Xiaohu or go back to New Year?" Bai Shan asked humbly, "What do you think, Brother Yang?" See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2341. Yang Hesha glanced at him and said with a smile, "You guys should go back. If you can go back to the capital a few years ago, it will be good, but it doesn't matter if you can't make it. When you return to the capital on the second and third day of junior high school, Your Majesty may feel calmer after seeing it. After all, they are also rushing to the capital during the Chinese New Year, so they can barely show that they are not deliberately delaying the time. Although not very convincing in terms of the time they spend." Bai Shan glanced at Man Bao and asked Yang Heshu, "Your Majesty is so angry. Yang Hesha said angrily, "What do you think?" He said, "Zhai." He said that General Ashina praised you after returning, and said that you only separated in Shazhu city, because you brought more people, so the speed was slow. Your Majesty thought you were slow, and you should be back in the capital after 5 or 6 days, but it's been almost half a month and you haven't moved. By the way, I'm afraid you don't know yet. General Guo returned to his hometown with the coffin. He passed through Xiazhu 7 days ago, and now he should have arrived in the capital, Yang Hesha said. I asked General Guo when he set off, and he is better than you. He set off from Xiazhu 3 days later, and he has now returned to the capital. Guess what your Majesty will think of you. Man Bao and the others were first surprised, then Yi 11, General Guo Xiao returned home with the coffin back. Yang Hesha replied, this matter was not a secret in the court for a long time, so Zhou Man and the others were far away from the center of the court and had been on the road, so they hadn't heard of it. His Majesty felt remorse shortly after Chai Tuhu left, so he issued a new imperial decree to restore General Guo's official position, and sent people to welcome General Guo back to Beijing for his funeral. The emperor has always been kind to heroes. When many generals who followed him to death died, the emperor would let the Ministry of Rites manage the funeral for him, and even he often attended funerals to show his condolences. Yang Hesha said, Your Majesty is much softer now than before. If a military general made such a big mistake before, he would not have let it go so lightly, let alone change the day and night, and quickly withdraw his will. But don't act recklessly because of His Majesty's soft-heartedness. You did waste too much time on the road this time, so be prepared to plead guilty when you go back. Man Bao and Bai Shan could only shyly agree. Yang Hesha couldn't help laughing after reading it. Deed is deed, merit is merit. I heard that you have found a recipe for cowpox this time. Man Bao nodded and briefly talked about the process and effect of vaccination. Yang Hesha pondered and asked, Can I look at your data and medical records? That's important data. When Man Bao heard it, she said that there was no problem, and she could take out the booklet and show it to him when she came back. Man Bao felt that his hand was grabbed, and when he looked down, he saw Brother Qi, who was staring curiously at the red tourmaline on Man Bao's hand. This is the red tourmaline that Bai Shan ran 3 shops to find. There are 4 strings, which are overlapped and wrapped around his hand. It is particularly beautiful and eye-catching. Well, it also attracts the attention of children in particular. Man Bao stretched out his arms in front of his eyes and asked with a smile, Does it look good? Kui Shi said with a smile, I don't know what's going on with this kid. He is obviously a boy, but he really likes this kind of jewelry powder. She glanced at Yang Hesha with some anxiety, but she actually wanted to ask Man Bao child if she was sick in private. Man Bao said happily, My child, everyone likes shiny things. He can play with him if he likes it, but it's important. You can watch this kind of thing, but you can't put it in your mouth. Man Bao thought for a while, and when he felt that manpower was always slack, he said, Sister-in-law can use some bright fabrics to make some toys for him. Children like brightly colored and shiny things. These are not good for him to play with. Give him something to play with. Kui Shi was taken aback and asked, Is this normal? Yeah, it's nature, Man Bao said, everyone has a love for beauty, and children are more obvious because they can't hide their thoughts yet. Kui turned her head to look at her son who was leaning against Yang Hesha's legs, and then raised her head to look at her husband's face. Yang Hesha was originally smiling, but when he saw his wife's face, he couldn't help but froze. Kui was jealous, so she couldn't help but pursed her lips, and pinched her son's face with her fingers. She was really unscrupulous. She obviously took him the longest time every day, and she often took him to play. Whenever his father appeared, he was always more attached to his father. She didn't think there was anything wrong with this, but now she felt so sad. Man Bao didn't know what she was thinking, so she happily took out a box and opened it to Mrs. Kui, sister-in-law. Look, these are the things we gave you. The gift was given by everyone, and Yang Heshu also received a good piece of original jade, which has been opened, and the condition is good, but it has not been polished. By Shandao, we saw 2 pieces of jade like this at the time, and they were in good condition, so we thought of giving it to brother Yang and Swexian Tang. If we want to do anything, we can design it ourselves and let the craftsman do it now. Yang Heshu was very pleasantly surprised when he saw this white jade. It's really beautiful, thank you. What Kui she got was a box of gems, all of which Man Bao personally picked. She smiled and said, this is really a souvenir. Man Bao and the others brought a lot of gifts to their relatives and friends, plus the things they plan to collect and use, and don't plan to sell out. They add up to a lot anyway. Everyone went to the luggage, and finally felt that they were reluctant to do anything here. Even Yin He urged Man Bao, when your niece comes, ask her if she can go back with us. Zhou Lejun only learned from Xiangming when it was almost dark. She combed her hair in a bun and was obviously married. Before entering the door, she rushed up to hug her sister, and then went to Zhou Man, where's my aunt? Zhou Liru blushed and said excitedly, little aunt is talking to Lord Yang in the study, second sister. She glanced at Xiang Mingxiu who came in behind, and asked in a low voice, are you married to your second brother-in-law? Zhou Lejun tapped her forehead and smiled, you are stupid, you call him second brother-in-law, can I not marry him? Xiang Mingxiu stepped forward with a smile and bowed to his sister-in-law. Zhou Liru hurriedly returned the salute and said, my sister-in-law was talking to Lord Yang about the cowpox in the study. I'll take you to see our luggage first. Zhou Lejun, what's so good about luggage? When she turned a yard to see the pile of luggage in the car and in the yard, she opened her mouth, is this all your luggage? When I went there, I had already brought enough luggage, so how could it be 3 or 4 times more when I came back? Zhou Liru said, yes, there are things we bought for ourselves, as well as for our relatives and friends, and the rest are for sale. Second sister, you don't know, we encountered a horse thief's den on the way, there are many if we don't take it well, we will have more things. See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2342. Zhou Lejun and Xiang Mingxiu, why haven't they encountered a den of horse thieves? No, shouldn't you be robbed when you encounter a den of horse thieves? Man Bao and Bai Shanzheng talked to Yang Heshu little by little about the results of their vaccination this time. Looking at the data, Yang Heshu couldn't help but feel up and down, how long will it take to be implemented in the private sector? Man Bao thought for a while and said, we have to go back and discuss with Xiao Yuanzheng and the others, but we should test it a few more times to make sure that there are no other bad effects before implementing it. Yang Heshu also pressed his excitement, nodded slightly, and said to her, if it is determined that the success rate is so high, and there is no adverse impact, Xiaohu is willing to be the first state to implement it. Man Bao was taken aback and asked, can the people accept it? Yang Heshu, Xiaohu has a more suitable public opinion than other state capitals. First, Xiaohu has experienced smallpox, and the memory of this is very fresh, so it is very persuasive. Secondly, your Imperial Physician Office has a good reputation in Xiaohu. He smiled and said, you don't know, Xiaohu privately offers a lot of longevity tablets for you and Imperial Physician Lu and Imperial Physician Zheng. Man Bao said, yeah, I still have a tablet for longevity. Of course, Yang Heshu laughed, as far as I know, you have the most. Man Bao was happy, it must be because I am the most lovable. Yang Heshu nodded with a smile. Not only was she the most amiable, but she also had the most patients who survived. Adding the two together, she naturally had the most worshippers. Man Bao really wanted to take a look, and Yang Heshu said when he saw it, it's not easy to break into other people's houses. If you want to see it, then go to the Taoist temple on the mountain and have a look. There are also many people who not only offer offerings in their own homes. The tablets of longevity are also offered in temples and Taoist temples for your safety and longevity. Man Bao got excited and looked at Bai Shan. Bai Shan said, then go have a look. Yang Heshu also said, although you are in a hurry to rush back to the capital, I think it is impossible for you to rush back a few years ago. Why don't you stay in Xiaoshu for a few more days, and you can take out the goods in your hand, and then you can rest for a while. Wait until the 27th and 28th, and then go faster on the road. You should be able to return to the capital on the 4th and 5th day of the first month. Your Majesty sees that you are going back in the first month of the first month, and you can guess that you are on the road after a little thought. New Year's Eve. It's quite pitiful to think about, maybe the breath in my chest will disappear. Man Bao and Bai Shan felt that Yang Heshu, who was smiling softly at this time, was a little dark. When the two of them walked into the yard where they lived, they heard a lively noise next door, and they couldn't help but walk over to see it, and saw Bai Erlang and the others were showing Zhou Lejun what they brought back. The two of them also stood by and listened. Xiang Mingxiu turned around and saw them. Zhou, auntie. He paused and called again, little aunt. Then he nodded to Bai Shan. Bai Shan also nodded in return. Zhou Lejun looked back and saw Man Bao, and rushed up to hug her in surprise, looking at what they brought back and saying, little aunt, you have made a fortune this time. Man Bao said reservedly, it's okay, so. She and Zhou Lejun said, I'm just looking for you. It's not good for us to take all of them back, so we only plan to bring some of them, and you will send the rest back to the capital. We'll find a way to do it then. Zhou Lejun was puzzled, don't you have soldiers with you? Wouldn't it be safer for them to escort them? There are so many people, and they are officials. As long as they are not blind, they will not dare to attack them, right? Man Bao sighed and said, what matters to us now is not the bandits on the road, but the imperial censor and his majesty in the capital. Anyway, we have to go back to Beijing by light car in 2 days. We can bring a few cars of luggage at most, and the rest it will be handed over to you. She asked curiously, aren't you going home for the new year? Zhou Lejun smiled and said, because I don't know when my aunt will come back, I deliberately waited for my aunt here. Zhou Lejun thought for a while and said, if my aunt entrusts us with these things, we will be on the road with you, at most 1 day behind you into the city. Bai Shan immediately said, it's okay to enter the city on the same day. You are a caravan, and we are an envoy. You can go back and forth together and enter the city at a distance. He said, after you go back, put your things in the yard of my house in Early Lane for the time being, and then move back to the house little by little. He turned his head and said to Man Bao, you don't have to be very careful. If there is a censor who even stared at the yard under my family's name, then it's useless for us to hide. Because it's not a big thing for them, officials bring a little more souvenirs when they go on business. This is a very common thing when the Sacred Heart is normal, and it may be a proud thing to get the Sacred Heart. When you lose your Sacred Heart, everything you do is wrong. Bai Shan didn't think they had lost their Sacred Heart. At most, the emperor was a little angry because of their delay on the way. Man Bao thought about it and felt that what he said was reasonable, so he decided that Zhou Lejun would go with them, and entrusted them with most of the luggage to escort back. Man Bao, by the way, you can introduce me to a few merchants who are able to buy spice gems from the western regions. Xiang Mingxiu was surprised, auntie wants to do these things in Xiaoshu. Then what are they escorting? Zhou Lejun asked with bright eyes, little aunt, did you bring other merchants from the western regions when you came back this time? They want to sell the goods in Xiaoshu. Man Baidao, it's not a businessman, it's some guards who escorted us to Xiaoshu. They also brought some spices and gems when they came back. The price from Xiaoshu is a bit low, so they followed us to Xiaoshu. Already? Zhou Lejun was a little disappointed when he heard it, so this is a one-shot deal. Man Bao asked curiously, do you want to talk to the merchants in the western regions? Does our family have so much money in the spice and gem business? Zhou Lejun said with a smile, forget the gem business, but the spices can be made, and I want to sell them the moisturizing cream we make at home. There are also some medicinal materials. I heard that the environment in the western regions and ours is here. It's different, there should be a lot of medicinal herbs we have here. But the raw medicinal materials are cheap after all, so I want to sell them as medicines, Zhou Lejun said. In addition to the ointment for moisturizing the face, whitening skin, and removing acne, there is also the scar-removing ointment that my aunt taught us to make before. If we can make some more to prevent colds and over-the-counter medicine like a fever would be better. Man Bao opened his mouth wide, you want to grab business with Ji Shitang. Zhou Lejun said, it's not to grab business, I still get medicines such as pills from Ji Shitang. She never thought of making medicine by herself. Now she is very busy making ointments at home, and making pills is more careful and the cost is higher. Not to mention her, even the fifth aunt may not be able to make it according to the recipe. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2343. Before I came out, I spent money to buy another shop not far from our restaurant, which specialized in selling ointments, and then used them to make ointments. Now Wu Ants and the others don't make ointments at home every day, but go to the shop. Done. Man Bao was taken aback and asked, why, can't you do it at home? Zhou Lejun said helplessly, young ant, you don't know, Uncle Six's son can crawl and walk now, and stuff everything he sees in his mouth. Before Aunt Lu didn't pay attention, he just grabbed a handful and grinded it out. He just stuffed the medicine powder into his mouth, and the boiled medicine smelled so bitter, but he could drool over the medicine. Grandpa was dying of worry, saying that he was even worse than the sixth uncle. What should I do? Zhou Lejun and Man Bao took stock of the things they brought back, and said, this year, the family's fields and Zhuangzi have had a bumper harvest. Except for the rice seeds that my aunt let us plant, there are no other problems. Man Bao asked, are those rice seeds still bad? Zhou Lejun thought for a while and said, brother said that it's not all bad. When I planted it, it grew stronger than ordinary seedlings. It was also good when transplanted, but later there were problems when it grew up, and some of them couldn't bear ears. Some die as they grow, and others grow extremely well, with very long spikes, and one spike has twice as many grains as the next, or even 3 or 4 times as many. Man Bao's eyes brightened, and he asked, have the seeds been separated? Yes, the elder brother has been harvested separately according to your instructions, and we will wait for the planting next year to see the situation. Man Bao nodded, that's right, those rice seeds were obtained from a distance. When they first arrived, there was always something that didn't suit them, so it's better to experiment slowly and wait until it gets used to it. It doesn't matter if this batch doesn't fit, just take another batch from DRD. Teacher Mo told her a few days ago that the simulated environment laboratory that the Alliance promised to build for DRD has been completed, and there may be some differences, but as close as possible to the ecological environment of her world. She believed that with enough time, they would be able to grow high-yielding grains. After counting the luggage, Man Bao took Zhou Lejun and Xiang Mingxiu to see De Yu and others the next day. She said to Zhou Lejun, take them to see your friends. Let's go up the mountain to the Taoist temple and visit the temple. It was the first time for them to see such a bustling street in the heavy rain. Yesterday, they could be said to be dizzy. When they heard that Zhou Man was not with them, they couldn't help but ask, are there more people on the mountain? Man Bao proudly said, It's generally average. The most people are naturally the people on the street, but it's almost New Year's Eve, and there are many people who go up the mountain to worship the Buddha and worship the gods, and there are also many people who enshrine the tablets of longevity. Heavy Rain looked at her strangely. What are you proud of when people go to worship gods? Manbao straightened his back, and said reservedly, I'm not proud, but I heard that many people offered my longevity cards in front of Buddhas and immortals, so I went up and took a look. Heavy Rain. The brothers went to see the Heavy Rain, and the Heavy Rain turned to talk to Xiang Mingxiu. Then we have Brother Lao today. Xiang Mingxiu smiled and said, You're welcome. Zhou Lejun led them to meet their friends with a smile. They couldn't eat the gems they brought in the Heavy Rain, but they also knew many businessmen, including people from Taiyuan and Jiangnan. You can introduce them to them. Even the spices, they didn't plan to buy much, because Zhou Man brought back a lot, and if she couldn't sell it back in the capital, they could take over from her. Things from the western regions are still very popular in Xiaozhou. Although the Chinese New Year is approaching, there are many fewer merchants in Xiaozhou, but the goods in Heavy Rain's hands are still not enough for everyone to share. Zhou Lejun led them out for a circle, and then he took out all the things in his hands, and the price was almost twice that of Shazhou city. In this way, the merchants who bought it also felt that they made a profit. Because the people were led by Xiang Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun, no one would suspect that the gems and spices were fake, so even the merchants who had never been involved in these two kinds of things couldn't help but buy some. Heavy Rain stuffed the money into his arms, and found that the bulging bag could not fit, so he took it out and put it in a sack and carried it on his shoulders. He smiled and greeted Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun. The brothers of Lord Zhou and Lord Bai are the brothers. Show your loyalty, and when you get back to the inn, I'll invite you to a drink. Xiang Mingxiu smiled and said, Brother Du, you are very polite. Lord Zhou is our aunt. Since you are my aunt's friends, we should help. My aunt and the others said that thanks to your support along the way, they can safely reach the western regions and Henan province. Return. Heavy Rain was stunned for a moment and then smiled, You're welcome, you should. Zhou Lejun took the opportunity to ask, Will you still send things to Xiaozhou in the future? She smiled and said, As you can see, Xiaozhou is very lively, but now it's New Year's Eve, it's not the busiest time. The most merchants in Xiaozhou are from May to October. No matter how many goods you have, you won't have to worry about them in Xiaozhou. Heavy Rain was so excited that he couldn't help but look at his brothers. Not to mention, this trip has made more money than he has earned in the past 5 years, and there is nothing wrong with it except that it is dangerous. Heavy Rain would like to go a few more trips. Others have their own considerations. If I have a daughter-in-law and a child, I will go this way. Yeah, Heavy Rain, you don't have a daughter-in-law or parents, so you don't have to worry about feeding your whole family. When you go out for a year or two, except for our brothers, they will talk about you when they are drinking, and the elder brother will talk about you a few times, so it's not easy for us to go out. Heavy Rain was heartbroken. I also want to marry a daughter-in-law when I go back this time. Who are you marrying? Heavy Rain turned his head and asked Xiang Mingxiu and Zhou Lejun, I heard that you can buy a daughter-in-law here. Where can you buy it? Frowning Xiang Mingxiu, Zhou Lejun asked him, Who told you? It's all said. You have a place to buy people, there are many beautiful girls there, and you can buy them back as daughters-in-law. Zhou Lejun, then you have to find someone. What kind of daughter-in-law are you looking for? Beautiful, obedient, you have to be able to cook, make clothes, and go to the ground. You said after thinking about it, by the way, it's better to be literate and smart, and it would be better if you can know medicine. Xiang Mingxiu. Zhou Lejun grinned at him, then said, Stop dreaming, you can't buy it? Heavy Rain stared, Why? I have money. You are rich, but there is no such person in the hands of Renya, Zhou Lejun said, even if there is, it will not be your turn. Don't say that such a person will not become self-selling, it is really necessary to sell. There are many people robbing you. You have no power and money, so how could you be able to rob others? See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2344. Man Bao and the others couldn't stay in Xiaohu, so after going up the mountain to see his longevity card, he was ready to go back to Beijing. At this time, De Yu had already met 7 or 8 people in Xiaohu city with the help of Xiang Mingxiu, but he could not find the daughter-in-law he was looking for. He could only accept the money slyly, and followed the crowd to see Zhou Man off. I heard that the capital is very big, are there better people who sell it there? Man Bao also learned about De Yu's mate selection criteria from Zhou Lejun. Seeing him looking sadly in the direction of the capital, he reached out and patted his shoulder and said, "Brother De Yu, if you want to marry someone who looks like a fairy, then you have to become a godlike person first, so that you can match, and you will have the opportunity to meet such a person." Heavy rain, is that a person like an angel? Is it worse than you? Man Bao shook his head and said with a serious face, "No, I am much better than me. Except for literacy and some medical skills, I am smart and beautiful, and I can't do anything else." After a heavy rain, he tangled, "Then shall I relax the conditions?" The brothers standing behind him immediately said to Zhou Man, "Master Zhou, how can you remind him? He should be single." "Yes, he will end up hurting other people's girls by marrying a daughter-in-law like this. If the girl he marries is not as good as he wants, wouldn't it become a pair of grudges?" That's right, he should continue to look for such a fairy-like character." The heavy rain waved at them, Go, why are you everywhere?" Man Bao said, "If you want, you can go to the capital with us to see." He shook his head and said, "Forget it, if Big Brother knew that I ran to the capital without permission, he would kill me." Yang Heshu smiled and said to him, "Xiaohu has a large population, especially after April every year, there are many merchants who come to Xiaohu, and there are always businessmen with female relatives. If Brother Heavy Rain doesn't mind, you can go to Xiaohu city more. After a few trips, maybe you can meet someone who is destined for you." Man Bao and Bai Shan recommended Xiaohu together for Yang Heshu. Yes, Xiaohu has a large population, so it depends on how you feel about finding a wife. How many people do you meet? What if you see the right eye? Heavy Rain looked at them suspiciously. Man Bao was a little unconvinced. "Doubt us? You don't even look at it, I'm already engaged, don't I have more experience than you?" Bai Shan turned his head and glanced at her, wanting to tell her that even if you are engaged, you are no more experienced than others. Who knew that the Heavy Rain would be thoughtful and nodded slightly, "That makes sense." Bai Shan quickly pulled Man Bao to say goodbye to everyone. Yang Heshu and Mrs. Kui smiled at them and said, "Take care all the way, we have prepared a lot of vegetables and bacon frozen meat for you. According to the itinerary, you should be on the road to celebrate the New Year. When the inns and restaurants are hard to find, prepare some more food on the road." He also warned, "Don't stay on the road for too long, if you don't go back after the 7th day of the first lunar month, it will be difficult for your majesty to explain it there." Man Bao and Bai Shan responded together and set off. Their caravan and Xiang Mingxiu's caravan formed a team, and they did not start to separate until Yangzhou. Man Bao and the others continued their journey to the capital, while Zhou Lejun and the others decided to stay in another courtyard in Yangzhou for one day, and then enter the capital the next day. So Man Bao and the others went to Beijing by light car Jiankong. It was really light car Jiankong. There were only 3 luggage carts in total, which directly reduced 9 luggage carts. The ox cart carrying the wounded soldiers also ran, but the ox did not have enough stamina when it got up, so it didn't run very fast. Fortunately, Yangzhou was not too far from the capital, and Man Bao and the others finally made their way to the capital during Shenxi. As soon as he entered the city, Manbao was at a loss, not knowing where to go, but Mr. Zhuang said, first go to the station, then go to the Honglu temple next to the station to hand in the seal, and then send someone into the palace to deliver the message, and finally return to each other. Everyone is waiting for news. Mr. Zhuang said, today's fourth day, the Yamen has not yet opened the seal, and His Majesty may not announce the meeting. After hearing this, everyone calmed down and went to the inn immediately. Of course, they didn't need to live in the inn. It was the wounded soldiers on the ox cart who needed to live there, and Manbao didn't want them to pay. Of course, she didn't pay for it herself, said directly to Yuchen, this is a patient who has been planted with cowpox. Your Majesty may summon him later, so don't be slow. The postmaster glanced at the soldiers who were either old or lacking arms and legs, and was speechless for a while. The patient selected by Master Zhou is really unique. Manbao smiled and said, where is it? Well, I'll give them to you. Treat them well. He also said to these retired veterans, I live in the Zhou residence in Congai Yuanfeng. If you have anything to do with me, you can find out after a little inquiries. This is a doorpost. The veterans immediately took it, and the courier on the side saw that he really did not dare to neglect these people, and led them to the room to rest with a smile. Mr. Zhuang led Manbao to Honglu Temple to hand in the seal. There are officials on duty in Honglu Temple. When they saw Zhou Man coming back at this time, they were shocked, and then they were overjoyed. Oh, Lord Zhou, Lord Zhuang, you are finally back. I heard about them 20 days ago, but they haven't come back yet. God knows how worried they are, for fear that they will encounter bandits on the road and capsize in the gutter. Victory had an accident when he returned to Beijing. However, although there are officials on duty in Honglu Temple, but the seal is not open at this time, and he can't give Zhou Man a cut book, but he still accepts their seal, and with a smile, he issued a receipt for them, and then he asked with a smile, Master Zhou, is this journey going smoothly? Manbao smiled and nodded, it's very smooth. The people who have been planted with cowpox are now living in the post station not far away. When the Taiyuan hospital will come back to see the diagnosis and confirm the situation, His Majesty may also summon him. The officials of Honglu Temple were delighted to hear this, and hurriedly asked, can you send someone to inform the palace? If he didn't go, he wouldn't mind letting the people from Honglu Temple run around. Hearing that Nikanjun had sent soldiers over, he was disappointed for a moment, and then smiled, today is the fourth day of the new year, and the Yamen has not been opened yet, so just report to the palace that it is safe, and your Majesty may call you again in 2 days. The adults are running all the way, it is better to go home to pack up and rest, and wait for the notice from the palace. Manbao responded, and after taking the receipt, he led the people home. Nikanjun had to take his men back to the barracks, so they distributed their luggage on the street. Among the 3 carts of luggage, 1.5 were soldiers' luggage and ashes that could be burned. Everyone moved a few boxes from the other car. After checking it, he said to Manager Li, there's still something in that box. There's something about us. Manager Li rummaged through the booklet and determined that it was, so he opened the box for them to take. See you at 9.